all there is. Kind of hit the ceiling. I had written film music for the big film studios there in Germany, and remind you that market is relatively small compared to the film market here in the US. And I've written arrangements for all the orchestras and had worked for all the TV stations, so I felt I'm only 29 now and I want to learn so much more about music. And also it was a time that by then it was the mid-90s. Even though I was busy writing film scores, it was not the kind of music that I wanted to write. I always wanted to write big, lush, emotional film music, but the directors and producers at the time, they wanted minimalistic music that doesn't show too much emotion, and Germans have a problem with showing emotions anyway. And then I thought, this is not the place for me then. Then I have to go to a place where I can write the music that I want to write and not have to hold back how I want to write. Mm-hmm. And also has to, obviously, to do with budgets. The budgets for the film scores weren't as big as it, so that would allow for me to write big, lush music. So that's when I decided to come to Los Angeles, and I asked my then girlfriend if she would come with me. And she also was at a point in her career where she wanted to move on. She's a violinist, and she was playing in a German language country band. She was singing and playing fiddle. And so we decided to come together to Los Angeles. And I had, and I didn't really know anyone here. I had been out here 2 years before to record a project for a German library music company. So I made some connection with some musicians, but I had no client here. And I knew one producer for TV movies through a friend in Germany, another network executive in Germany, who I called up when I came here, and he was very gracious and said, I don't have any work for you, but here's a TV movie that has already music on it, but if you like, you can take it home and score a few scenes, just I can see how you work. And so I took this film home, and I did not score 1 or 2 scenes. I scored the whole film, knowing that he didn't really need my music. He already had music for this film. Mm-hmm. And that impressed him so much that for his next film, he hired me instead of his regular composer.
Can we know his name?
That was Len Hill,
okay,
who unfortunately passed away last year. And he was the head of ABC television movies. And mind you, this was the era of the Sunday night network TV movies, mm-hmm. where every big major network here in the US had their weekly Sunday night TV movie, which they produced with a good budget. So I thought, because when I came here, I thought it's going to take at least 3-4 years until I get into the business. And then I had my first year already 2 TV movies, and I thought, wow, that's going to go.
And you got them both from this same guy?
Got to go from the same guy.
Wow. So you really impressed him.
Yeah. And so my getting into the business happened, I thought, quicker than I expected. But unfortunately, that was quickly the end of the TV of the movie era here, because along came reality television with Big Brother and Survivor.
Yeah.
And 1 year later, TV movies were history. And so my friend Len Hill, this producer, he quit the business. And so I had Sandy was here and that was my only client. He stopped doing movies, and I had nothing. And I was luckily still work from Germany. I was still doing this weekly medical drama show. So they in Germany, that was way before you could do this over the internet. They would message me the VHS tapes. I would record the music here, send them back on timecode DATs. And that kept us afloat for at least 4 or 5 years. I would not earn a single American dollar for 5 more years.
Wow.
And I was also was flying back there occasionally to conduct projects there, was conducting orchestras, but living here and trying to break into the business here.
And so why do you think you couldn't, I mean, it sounds like you were very accomplished. Why do you think it was so hard for you to break into it here? It's just because it's such a closed-knit?
It's close-knit community, and also it's all about networking. And since when I came here, I only knew this one guy, which in the beginning worked out great, but it turned out that if you only have one contact, and if that one contact suddenly disappears or quits doing what he does, then
always a danger in this business to have one client.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I didn't that didn't discourage me too much, because what helped me is that for these German projects, I was producing the music now here in the US. I needed to hire musicians and studios to record that music. I was still the musical director for the equivalent of the Oscars in Germany. There's like a movie award show on a smaller scale than the Oscars, but it's similar. It's like a movie award show. So I would once a year fly back to Germany to conduct that show, but I would do the pre-records here at Capitol Studios. The musicians after the recording session, that was a big band and strings, and the musicians after the recording session would come up to me and say, hey, how they like to play for me and how much they enjoyed playing that recording session. And first I thought they're just blowing smoke up my behind just to get called again, and but they said, no, seriously, we really like your music, and we would love to play something that you write if you just write for yourself, if not for a commercial project. And I asked, well, how do we do this? And they said, well, here at the Musicians Union in Hollywood, we have rehearsal rooms. Why don't we get together once a month, and you bring your charts, you write something, and we run it down. And I said, okay. And those were top studio musicians that asked me to do this, and that was sort of my start of my big band. Mm-hmm. So we met, from that time on, we met once a month at the Musicians Union and just rehearsed my charts without any intent.
No intent to actually go out and do a show.
No, exactly. So we did this for a couple of years, and then someone said, hey, we should go out and play some gigs. So we booked us at Catalina's in Hollywood, this jazz club, and so we played there a few times. And so I wrote more material, so we had a book that we could play at gigs. And then I had this show I was doing in Germany that got into syndication, so I got some royalty stream, and suddenly I had like a small windfall of some money, and instead of buying a new car or a better house, I invested that into my big band and recorded an album with it. And that album received 2 Grammy nominations. So from that on, word spread around a little bit, and the contractor that I used to hire musicians for my various recordings that I was due for Germany, his name was Jules Shake, and he got me in touch with Christopher Cross. Uh-huh. So Christopher was my first recording artist client that I was working for here, and which became a good friend and a long-time client. And then Michael Bolton got a wind of me and heard about me, and he hired me, and so suddenly I was working a lot for recording artists. And then David Foster heard of it, and then he hired me a lot.
Those are pretty good clients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I eventually even got back into film music and scored some movies for cable channels like the Sci-Fi Channel or the Hallmark Channel.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever get any scores for a feature film?
Independent feature films, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No studio films, but independent feature films, yeah.
Oh, cool. Any of those that we would know
feature
about?
Films?
No, any of the films that that you've done in the United States,
yeah,
that people might know
not
the films?
Probably not as a composer. As a composer, I did films like Monster Mutt and what was called Alien Siege. That was a sci-fi movie. Crimson Force. But as an orchestrator and conductor, I worked on, because sometimes I do also conducting and orchestrating for other composers. I did like the Smurfs movies and the Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Those were a few in the last 3 years, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So once you got in with those artists, what did you do for David Foster? Everybody knows David Foster.
Yeah, for David Foster I worked. That's also an interesting story. Once I met David, he came to one of my big band gigs, I think, and asked me after the gig, hey, do you write for strings? And I said, yes, as a matter of fact, I also write for strings. And he said, well, come to my studio the next day. So I went to his studio, and he was working at that time with a young artist called Renee Olstead. She was 15 at the time, I think. So I wrote some string arrangements for that. We recorded them, and I thought, wow, David Foster, because obviously there was a name I knew I was from my childhood, one of the biggest producers, and I thought, great, now I'm working for David Foster. But then he didn't call for 2 years. Which is, can't really blame him, because he has all these great arrangers at his disposal. Why would he have to call me? But then after 2 years, the phone rang again. It was again David Foster. So he called again. It was, I don't know what the project was, but was something small, like a small string arrangement for something else.
Mm-hmm.
And then he again didn't call for 2 years. I mean, luckily in between I was working for other clients, and I got to know Phil Ramone, worked for him somewhat. But David Foster was always someone I wanted to get more into business with. And then he called me more once we did the Michael Buble Christmas record. That was like 7-8 years ago or so. And that hit really big, the Michael Buble Christmas record. And ever since, I've been working more with David Foster.
Mm-hmm. Well, what else have you done with him?
David Foster, the Rod Stewart Christmas record. Come to think of it, a lot of Christmas records. Mary J. Blige Christmas record, Josh Grobin records.
And you were the now were you the composer or just
the arranger and conductor?
Okay.
Yeah.
So David was actually writing the
actually
music?
Most on these records we do old material with cover songs.
Oh, okay.
Great American Songbook or whatever you want to call it, and especially Christmas records.
Mm-hmm.
David would maybe write one song, or if at all, for these projects, but the rest, the projects that David does are mostly covers.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. And so how I met you was with Christopher Cross, because I was out on tour with Christopher Cross, and we did some shows with orchestra, and you had done the string arrangements,
yes,
on his records.
Yeah.
And so whenever he would do a show with an orchestra, he would hire you to come out and conduct the orchestra.
Correct.
And that's
yes.
how we met.
Yeah.
That's cool, because that's otherwise I wouldn't know you and I wouldn't be here right now. Who else have you worked with? Even if you already mentioned their name, that was that gave you a bit of work and that was something of note.
Phil Ramone was
Phil Ramone,
and he was also a great person to learn from. He not writing per se, but it was great to experience Phil Ramone in the studio and how he acted as a producer, and how he, even though he's not really a musician producer like David Foster is. David Foster is a musician, as a producer that plays an instrument himself, and he can tell you if he doesn't like a note in my arrangement, he can point to it and can explain to me in musical terms what he wants to do different. Phil Ramone was different in the sense that he is not as musically trained as a David Foster is, but Phil would still have a vision and would see the bigger vision beyond just the notes and beyond just the arrangement I would write. And he was great to watch how he would work with the artist. And Phil Ramone was a great role model for me in how to work with vocalists and how to get the best performance out of musicians and out of artists.
And what did you do? What project did you work with Phil?
With Phil, I did a George Michael record. Actually, I think it was George Michael's last record, the Symphonica. And we did a Matthew Morrison record, and I worked with Phil on a few TV shows. We did a fundraiser on TV called Stand Up to Cancer, where Phil was the producer and I did the arrangements.
That's pretty cool that you worked with Phil Ramone, yeah.
No, he was a
legend.
Yeah, he absolutely was a legend, yeah.
Okay, and who else now that you worked with?
I mean, I've worked with or for people like Barbara Streisand and Josh Grobin, Andrea Bucelli, Aretha Franklin, Paul Anka, blanking now, but there are so many. And during my time at American Idol, I did a lot of arrangements for TV shows here as well. I worked on American Idol for 7 years.
And what you were doing all the arrangements for American Idol?
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That was a big job, I'll bet.
Well, it was a very time-intensive job because we only had 1 day a week to write it all. Because the production week of American Idol started out on a Thursday. That's when they get together. The producers get together used to get together with the contestants. And at that time, each week had like a theme. Let's say it was Beatles week. They would get together with the contestants on Thursday. Each contestant gets to pick out of 5 songs the Beatles song they want to do. Then in the Thursday afternoon, the contestants get together with